So now we've got our resolution set correctly. We can now go about and just kind of fine tune the position of the camera. So I'm going to change my transform to be in local mode so that I'm moving the camera forwards and backwards. It's actually lined up with the camera itself. Let's position it something like this. If we want to zoom in, we can either move the camera forward or we can change the field of view of the camera. So let's select that. Let's come over here. I'm going to set mine to, actually that's probably all right because these are the settings I used previously when I was just setting this up before, but yours by default, it'll probably be something more kind of wider like this. So you might want to either make it narrower or wider depending on the situation. I'm going to just move the camera interest to somewhere like this. Great stuff. So in this view, I'm going to press F4 on the keyboard so that I'm not looking at the wireframe. Now, what's a good idea is actually, you can move things around in your scene to make it more pretty, more attractive. You want, the composition to look as good as you can possibly get it. So I think what I'll do is I will just move the camera interest up, a tiny bit. But I might, I'm going to move this guy over to the left a little bit because I'm sort of thinking of like the rule of thirds. And this guy is, these two characters are probably the most interesting, the central focus of this scene. We tend to be drawn to characters, either human or otherwise. And I want him to be, I just feel he looks a little bit unbalanced with him being so close to the middle. So I'm going to move him over and I'm going to move the oil can with him. So if I select the control for him and the oil can, if I try and move him now, it doesn't move them as one because I'm in local mode here. So I need to change that to world mode, and now I can move them both over and try and position them something that I just feel looks a little bit more balanced. Let's try that. Yeah, that's fine, I think. And again, you might cite this big pole in the middle. Do I like that? So let's just have a look. I can find it in the navigator and I can just hide it temporarily. Actually, you know what? I feel like I don't mind it. It's sort of like dividing them two. They're obviously not looking at each other. Maybe they've had some kind of argument or something. I don't know. And this kind of dividing them actually, it looks quite nice, I think. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Great. So we're ready to do like a test render. So let's bring up the render settings and just make sure we are in Arnold mode because this time we're going to use Arnold. And we are. So let's bring up the preview render window. Now, when you click render, you should find that it changes automatically to the Arnold's own render view. So Arnold has its own render viewer. If yours doesn't do that, then what you'll want to do is come up to Arnold here and click on Arnold render view here. And that should bring up this window. So you'll notice that it looks a little bit different to the normal kind of render preview window we're used to, but it's quite similar, but it's just a little bit different. So there are a few different buttons in different places. So here we are. Let's just make sure that we've got the right camera selected. So I'll change that to camera. And then the way this works, when we want to do a render, we click on this little refresh button here. It's like a little loop with an arrow. And then it will go through, like I say, Arnold is slower. So it might take, a minute or so to do a render. If at any point you want to exit this, you can just press escape on the keyboard and that will stop the render. Now you'll also notice that it sometimes, particularly when we add in a light with some proper shadows, that it will look a bit kind of grainy. And don't worry about that basically, because we're going to turn up the render settings, the quality settings later. So initially the render setting is going to be quite low. Now, to speed things up, what we can do is we can actually just not render at full size for now. So we could go into the render settings and change that, but that would be a bit fiddly. There's an easier way of doing it, which is we just come over to the view menu here and we go to test resolution and we'll set it to something like 50%. And then we'll click on that refresh button again. And now it will be smaller, which means it's just quicker to render. So that's going to save us a little bit of time as we're kind of trying out the lights and stuff. So you'll notice that we haven't actually added any lights to our scene yet, and yet we're still kind of being able to see stuff. And that's because if you haven't added any lights to your scene, then 3ds Max will just add a default light to your scene. but we don't want to use the default light. We want to add in our own lights. So let's do that now. Let's go in and add in a light. So I'll move this out of the way for now. And let's go to the create panel here. And we want to change this now to lights. So the little light bulb icon, let's click on that. And then here, if yours is photometric or standard, you'll want to change that to Arnold, because Arnold has its own lights. It doesn't work with the normal lights. Now we only get one choice of light to create here, so we'll click on that. But then once you've clicked on it, you can change the kind of light from down here. So where it says shape and type, if we change that to, I'm going to create a spotlight to begin with. I'm going to try and just simulate a kind of sunny day here. So we'll create a spotlight to simulate the sun. I also want this to be a targeted light. So that means it has a object which it looks at, just like the camera does here. So let's click on targeted. And then I'm going to click into the scene where I want the light to be. And I'm going to drag out to where I want the target to be. So if I pop the target somewhere in the middle like that, and then I'll right click so we don't add any more. Great. So let's move this up a bit. So let's select the light and drag it up so it's kind of shining down onto our scene. What we want to do though also is to rename our light. So over here, I'm going to click on this and call this key light, because that's going to be our main light source. And while we're here, let's also rename the camera. So I'm going to call this panel 5 camera. And then it'll be quite handy to have all this in a group. I mean, I call it a group, but actually what we're going to use is the same thing we used for this, which was that point object. So we could go in and make a new one, but actually let's just duplicate this object here. So let's press Control and V, so the same as paste. So Control V, and you want to make sure this is set to copy. And let's call this lights cameras. And now we have a object here called lights cameras, and we can drag these other objects into that so that they're now kind of nicely in a, like I said, I call it a group. And technically in 3ds Max groups are slightly different, but they're grouped together so that we can easily kind of show and hide them, and they're all kept together like that. Okay, so we've got our key light in the scene now. I've dragged it up. Let's have a look and see how that looks when we render it. So let's just click on this thing again to bring up our renderer. We'll click on renderer and it should bring up the Arnold one. And let's just make sure it's set to the right camera. And then click on the refresh button. Cool. So it looks very, very dark, you'll see. You can just about see some stuff, but it's really dark. Now, the reason for that is that the way Arnold lights work, I'll just press escape to stop it rendering, is that they're dependent on how far away they are from the object. And you'll need to change the intensity of the light greatly depending on how far away they are. So if I select the object and we go over to the modify panel, this is where we'll change the intensity once we've made it. And we come down here to intensity. Let's set it to 10 and then click on re-render. It's a little bit brighter. Let's click on escape. I'll just set this back. I thought I had changed the resolution, but it seems to have set itself back to 100. So let's go to 50. And let's set this now to the intensity to 100. So did I deselect the light? Let's just select it again. Select the intensity at 100 and render again. We go, getting better. Let's click on escape again. And let's set it to 1,000 and see how that does. So there we go. We select the light, set it to 1,000. Let's try that. There we go. That's kind of looking better. Just for fun, let's add in another 0 and see how it looks at 10,000. That's obviously too high. So let's set it back to 1,000. But you may find you need to set it to whatever value. So you may find you need to have really high values in here, or you may need to have really small values. I'm just going to try 2,000 actually, just to see how that looks. Because I do want it to look like it's quite a bright day. You don't really want things burnt out. You see here, it's just starting to kind of get burnt out a bit. Sometimes you may want that. I don't in this case. I'm going to set it to 1,500, I think. Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm happy with that now. Now, depending on the size you built your scene, you may actually, if you built your scene very, very small, you may have to put in really small values here. So it could be you're putting in like 0.1, or it could be you're putting in like 1,000,000 if you built your scene really, really big. And that's not unusual. So don't worry about that. That's just the way that Arnold works. But like I say, because the light basically gets dimmer the further away it is from the object. So if your scene is very, very big, you're going to have to put in a higher value to compensate for that. Now, one thing that's quite nice about the Arnold render view is we can actually take these snapshots anytime. So if I take a snapshot, click on this little button here, it will take a snapshot here. And then when we do another render, we can kind of very easily compare them. Now, if this kind of thing at the bottom is hidden, you may just need to pull it up like that so that you can actually see it. But let's say we wanted to compare to different lighting setups. So if I now change this back to like 100, or let's say even like 900, and hit enter, and we do a re-render. There we go. And what I can do, I don't necessarily have to wait for it to finish. I'm just going to press escape because it does take quite a long time. So once you've got the basic kind of value, you can click on the little snapshot button, and now we can quickly kind of compare the two to see what the difference is between the two. You might find when you've clicked on one that these buttons then disappear at the top, and just to get them back, you'll need to click on it again to deselect it. And now if you want to render again, you can do that from up there.